this morning comes in the category of fulfilling a promise that I made. When I say, we got to talk about that some more, we'll come back to that. Sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. But this time it's going to happen because the promise I made was to come back to Earth Day. We do Earth Day the way a lot of churches do. You could call it Earth Appreciation Day, and we love it, and it's great. But I realized when we got to the end of it this year that what I wanted, what I was still stuck on was a theological reflection on the earth and its place in our worldview, in our theology. Because we all know that no matter what the context is, our mindset, our attitude toward that, whatever the context is, determines how we behave. If we think this building is commercial rental space, we will treat it in a certain way. If we think it is sacred space and an extension of our homes, then we treat it in a different way. So it actually really matters what your attitude is toward something. And it seems pretty obvious that one of the contributing factors to our climate change problem is the attitude that many people have toward the earth. So I want to look at where that attitude might have come from, and if we were going to change it, in what direction would that be? In the Western world, the Judeo-Christian tradition that informs our mindset comes from the Bible. And on the topic of the earth, the Bible doesn't really have a lot to say. It's there, we need it. Occasionally we remember to thank God for it in the Psalms. Or we plead to be saved from one of its natural disasters, also in the Psalms. But most of the time it's pretty much taken for granted. And the closest we get to a specific citation is the Genesis reading this morning. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. And at least in one translation, and have dominion over, or the translation that Kaji read, and rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. Now, as we know, relying on the Bible for guidance goes beyond just the words that are in it. Because in addition to the words that are actually there, we have thousands of years of interpretation of the words. And unless we actually get serious about our Bible study, we hear stuff and we don't know if it's really in the Bible or if it's just an interpretation. So, for example, original sin is not in the Bible. It's Augustine's interpretation of the Adam and Eve story. Mary Magdalene was not a prostitute. That's not in the Bible. That's Pope Gregory the somethings, I forget the number, his interpretation of the words in the Bible. But we get stuck on the interpretations. And at least in other traditions, they very carefully separate. So there's the Torah, and then there's the Talmud, which is all the commentary. There's the Quran, and then there's the Hadith, which is all the extra stuff that people added. We have the Bible, and then we have a lot of extra stuff. And you know I'm not a big fan of most of the extra stuff, because never mind, that's a different story. But when it comes to this particular passage, a lot hinges on that word dominion or rule over. Because to rule over could include good stewardship, but it doesn't have to. There's also an interpretation which could justify exploitation. The one that goes, yeah, God gave us this earth and to use, and that's what we're doing, say the loggers and the miners and the corporate polluters. Okay, so the Bible by itself, we're not getting a lot of help there. When I want a modern progressive Christian take on something, I often turn to the Center for Progressive Christianity, which is now progressivechristianity.org. Their 8 points that define what it means to be progressive were originally published in 1996. That version didn't even mention the earth. Okay, nobody but Al Gore was thinking about the earth in 1996. But they've updated the 8 points. By 2011, there was a new 8, still 8, but there was a new point that said, strive to protect and restore the integrity of our earth. Okay, that's good. The current version, which has been streamlined down to 5 points, says, embrace the insights of contemporary science and strive to protect the earth and ensure its integrity and sustainability. I don't have any objection to those words. But I have to say, if I try to look at it objectively, there is still a sense in that phrase in which we are in control. The earth is an object out there to be understood, to be taken care of, and we're the ones doing the understanding and the taking care of. It's like we're, in charge. Okay. And it's not explicit, but it feels like that's still in there. So I went looking for a different mindset toward the earth in more fertile territory, which for me was the indigenous wisdom that we've been reading about in the book group for the last, 2, 3, 5 years. And I brought 4 of the books that I want to share, just a paragraph out of each, so we have some meat to put on these bones of a different way to think about our relationship to the earth. I think all of these books were originally my suggestions because they reflect my personal ongoing fascination with the commonalities under wisdom traditions. I just keep having this sense that there's really, at rock bottom, kind of something that is true. And it's true no matter which way you decide to represent it, what culture it shows up in, how you dress it, how you ritualize it. Underneath, there are some basic truths. And what I'm trying to grapple with is, what is that truth with respect to our relationship to the planet? That's where I'm going. So I've chosen 4 books, 2 Native American, 1 Polynesian, and 1 Celtic. So we got, and I admit it's a lot of Northern Hemisphere, but still, it's a pretty wide range. And for each book, I want to introduce the author and what they're trying to do and read you just a paragraph. And what I hope you will listen for is, how does this speaker imagine themselves in relationship to the earth? What is their mindset, their attitude? And then after we've been through all 4, we'll sort of put our observations together. So we're going to start with Kent Nearburn's Neither Wolf Nor Dog. You may remember Kent was our guest preacher a couple of years ago. Basically, he went to the PG house, so I had him. He owed us, right? So back when we were Zooming on Sundays. He's a writer, a sculptor, a PSR grad, and really a very thoughtful person. Years ago, he was asked by a Lakota Sioux elder named Dan to write Dan's life story, to capture the wisdom that Dan had acquired for the sake of his tribe, for the sake of the children to come. Dan didn't want it to get lost, but Dan didn't want just a ghostwriter. He wanted Kent to understand the Indian perspective, the Indian way of being in the world, and somehow capture that. So he took Kent on this road trip that was pretty amazing. And in this passage, Dan is explaining to Kent the difference between the Indian view of the earth and the white man's view. He contrasts how the Indians, his phrase was, belong to the land. It is their mother. And the white man's view of property that could be owned. So here's the excerpt. This is what you have to understand. To us, the land was alive. It talked to us. We called her our mother. If she was angry with us, she would give us no food. If we didn't share with others, she might send harsh winters or plagues of insects. We had to do good things for her and live the way she thought was right. She was the mother to everything that lived upon her. So everything was our brother and sister. The bears, the trees, the plants, the buffalo, they were all our brothers and sisters. If we didn't treat them right, our mother would be angry. If we treated them with respect and honor, she would be proud. For your people, the land was not alive. It was something that was like a stage where you could build things and make things happen. You understood the dirt and the trees and the water as important things, but not as brothers and sisters. They existed to help you humans live. You were supposed to make the land bear fruit. That is what your God told you. True that. How could we people ever talk together when we each believed our God had told us something different about the land? We couldn't, and we never did. Oh my God, that last sentence just gets me. How could we people ever talk together when we each believed our God had told us something different? Yeah. Okay. That's number one. Number two is braiding sweetgrass. Now, Robin Wall Kimmerer is a Western-trained biologist as well as a full member of the citizen Potawatomi Nation in the northeast part of the U.S. So Dan was in the Midwest, this is northeast. And because she talks about sweetgrass in this paragraph, I'm going to pass around a braid of sweetgrass. Handle it gently because it's dry and therefore a little brittle, but do smell it. Do smell it. It's quite lovely. Okay, there you go, sweetgrass. So her book begins with their creation story of Sky Woman coming down to the dark waters and how the animals, the turtle, the otter, the loon, the muskrat, et cetera, brought their gifts to help her create the land. She had brought flowers and seeds from Sky World, and so the plant kingdom was established. Our stories say that of all the plants, Ingashk, or sweetgrass, was the very first to grow on the earth. Its fragrance a sweet memory of Sky Woman's hand. Accordingly, it is honored as one of the 4 sacred plants of my people. Breathe in its scent, and you start to remember things you didn't know you'd forgotten. Our elders say that ceremonies are the way we remember to remember. And so sweetgrass is a powerful ceremonial plant cherished by many indigenous nations. It is also used to make beautiful baskets. Both medicine and a relative, its value is both material and spiritual. There is such tenderness in braiding the hair of someone you love. Kindness and something more flow between the braider and the braided, the two connected by the cord of the plait. Ingashk waves in strands, long and shining like a woman's freshly washed hair. And so we say it is the flowing hair of Mother Earth. When we braid sweetgrass, we are braiding the hair of Mother Earth, showing her our loving attention, our care for her beauty and well-being, in gratitude for all she has given us. Children, hearing the Sky Woman's story from birth, know in their bones the responsibility that flows between humans and the earth. Next, we will move out to Hawaii with Bowl of Light by Hank Wesselman. Hank was a Western-trained paleontologist with a strong psychic sense. He served in the same role as Kent Nearburn had for Dan, only Hank had been recruited by a revered Hawaiian elder named Hale Makua to write down Hale Makua's wisdom. The Hawaiians' worldview originated with the Polynesians who settled Hawaii centuries ago, so it is representative of the cosmology of Pacific Islanders all over the ocean. The book deals mostly with his view of the soul's journey, with your place in the chain of ancestors. The earth is perceived as feminine, as Mother Earth, and the many natural forces around them, and they got big ones like the ocean, like volcanoes, were personalized. Hank himself has a midnight encounter with Pele, that's the goddess of the volcano, in the crater at Kilauea. At one point he says, I was beginning to think I'd made a serious error coming out here in the middle of the night. Well, duh. So here's what Hank says about that encounter. Suffice it to say that the goddess did indeed make an appearance, although not in the form of a woman or goose or any other of her kino lau manifested embodiments. As my own visionary abilities have matured across many years of spiritual practice, my ability to perceive the transpersonal forces in whatever form has become more acute as well. On this occasion, I made my offerings, voiced my prayers, then waited. And on this night, Pele appeared to me as her light beyond the form, and also as the formless beyond the light, a brilliant spiritual essence that embraced me, loved me, and spoke to me with a voice expressing a vast, impersonal, yet benevolent intelligence. We're talking about an encounter with, well, transpersonal is how he called it, bigger than people. Now, later on in the book, Hale Makua says, in the ancient time of the ancestors, the deities, Keakua, were perceived by the people as generous and life-affirming. The mysteries revealed that these deities were symbolic aspects of nature, and that it is nature who is the true deity, a living God infused with the life force, the Mauli Ola. This life force was always experienced as benevolent and life-giving, and it was unconditionally free for all. The true deity is nature, so that's from Hawaii. And the last contribution comes from Ireland. This represents the Celtic wisdom that preceded Christianity, and when Christianity arrived in Ireland, it kind of merged. Often Christianity moved into a place like Hawaii and went and tried to obliterate the local culture. In Ireland, it was more like, well, come on in, we'll rename our goddess Bridget to Saint Bridget, and we'll change the name of our festival from, they basically accommodated Christianity without losing a lot of the Celtic wisdom, which is it's one of the reasons that Celtic Christianity is so popular. Anyway, this book is written by a scientist named Diana Beresford Kroger, who grew up in England and Ireland. Her mother was Irish and her father was English. She was orphaned while she was still in elementary school. And the family sent her to live with an old bachelor uncle while she went to school during the winter. But in the summers, she went to live with her mother's clan in the west of Ireland, in a little town called Lachines near Killarney. They had been subsistence farmers for centuries, and they still followed the Brehon Law, which is an ancient Irish legal system. In fact, it's probably the oldest codified legal system in all of Europe. According to the Brehon Law, an orphan's education was the responsibility of the entire town. Okay. Everybody contributes what they are especially good at, what they are known for. So every summer, Diana had these lessons from different people in the town, learning everything from medicinal plants to different kinds of butter churning. Important things for subsistence farmers, like, did you know if you coated fresh eggs with butter, that you could preserve them in their fresh state for months? Someday I'm going to try that, but anyway. It was a phenomenal education. And because those farmers were totally connected to the land, that's the education she got, was this land-based sensibility. And so here's the story that I chose to tell about her. Where's that? Oh. I interacted with the physical remnants of the ancient Celts before I knew properly what they were. As I've said, their altars, ring forts, cairns, and the like were everywhere in Lachines. From the kitchen window of the farmhouse, I could see an altar to which I hadn't yet been introduced. Late one morning, in the soft stretch of time between the first round of chores and the start of dinner preparations, Nellie, that's her great aunt that she lived with in the summers, was combing her beautiful silver hair when all of a sudden, as though we were in mid-conversation, she began talking to me. For the women of Ireland, back before Christianity laid its mantle over our lives, Beltane was a special day. Beltane's the Celtic festival on May Day. And she said, and here it still is a special day. Beltane, she told me, was a celebration for women on the first day of May. That spring morning, the women of the valley would rise before dawn and gather in the field in front of that altar. She gestured out the window. They would collect dew from the clover on the ground, and with it, perform a ritual that was, she said, the secret to their beauty. Once the sun appeared, they would look to the altar itself. From my seat, I could see the altar had a long channel carved down its center. As the sun rises on the first day of the month of May, it centers its rays directly down that cut stone channel, Nellie said. Out of the darkness of the night sky, a single shaft of light reaches for the altar. As it touches the stone, it looks as if the altar bursts into flame. It is a symbol of all the fires that have helped us in our passage through life's lonely walk. And then she goes on to describe doing the ritual, which is pretty interesting. And because she's a scientist, she goes on to describe the biochemistry of why it works, which is kind of fun. Diana carried this land-connected sensibility into her scientific career, and toward the end of her life now is very focused on trees. She points out that it was the evolution from ferns and cycads to flowering plants and trees that changed the Earth's atmosphere from being too high in carbon dioxide to support humans to the oxygenated atmosphere that we have today. Here's a direct quote. Trees don't simply maintain the conditions necessary for human and most animal life on Earth. Trees created the conditions through the community of forests. Trees paved the way for the human family. So these 4 glimpses are different, for sure, but they all show something more than just stewardship. They show humans understanding themselves as part of the web, part of Gaia's self-regulating system. I've been wondering how to connect this idea to the theological framework of Christianity, which for me is the teachings of Jesus. Okay, just set over to the side all the other stuff. But where's the touch point in the teachings of Jesus that includes a view like this of humans as part of the web? Jesus didn't have much to say directly about Gaia. He was a Jew. He was raised on Genesis, living at a time when people were at the mercy of the large forces of nature. But his teachings are indirectly helpful. For if we view Gaia as alive, as sentient, we would do well to just apply the golden rule, to treat Gaia as we would wish to be treated. It's time for your thoughts. Yeah. What do you think? Oh, Kevin, our Irishman. Okay, you go.
Oh, I'm going to start by going all the way to the reading because I have a visceral response to that passage.
Okay. Okay.
And it goes to, go forth and be fruitful and take, like, damn it, we've done it.
Yeah, and look where we are.
Be fruitful. If you go back to, is it Tychus? I forget who the demographic sociologist who looked and said, we don't have enough food to support the population, so we're going to die out, and then agricultural practices keep